Hi everybody, I just want to analyze a book that I have been reading this year. The book is about the Spanish flu and how it changed the world after 1918. It has a lot of good information and it's relevant to this year, obviously, with coronavirus. So the story is quite good, but today I just want to look at chapter 16 in particular, just to analyze the vocabulary, the prepositions, and phrasal verbs, all the grammar points. So I'm going to share the screen and you can see here, okay, so I have 4 pages and I recommend that you take a screenshot, that you take a picture of the 4 pages I will show you now, and then to read yourself first to try and have an idea of the story of the text. And after, I'm going to show you my pages with the analyzed vocabulary, with the colors. Okay, so if you want to, I'm going to make this bigger. So this is page 1. If you want to take a screenshot, okay, let me move this. That's page 2. Sorry, page 3 and page 4. Okay, so we'll start again, and I'll try and move this a bit better. So there's page 1. Page 2, not much help. Page 3. Okay, I'm back to the start. So there's one more time. That's page 1. That's the first page of chapter 16. The second page, the third page, and the 4th page. Okay, so as I said, I recommend that you take a screenshot of each page and try to read the text yourself first, because now, and then you can come back, because now I want to go through to analyze each part. Okay, so these are my notes. This is the first page, and I have to say the story is a little heavy, it's a little dark, it's a little depressing, particularly the first page. But after the second, the third, and the 4th page are a little bit more interesting. But I just wanted to show you the pages. I just wanted to show you the story. So for the grammar, particularly for the purpose of the grammar, just to focus on the vocabulary, the prepositions, the phrasal verbs, and other points like that. Okay, so that's really the focus. The story is maybe secondary. Okay, so if you look at the title, The Green Shoot of Recovery. So green shoots is related to botany and related to the plants, because after the winter, you have the little shoot, brote in Espanol, brotes verdes. So you have the little sign or the little signal of positivity, of color. And here it's speaking about the green shoots, the positivity, little sign after the pandemic of the Spanish flu. Okay, so you can see on the top left, the vocabulary is underlined with orange in the text, the important vocabulary. In the circle in green are the prepositions. Okay, so I want to focus on the prepositions and which verb, which word are connected to the preposition. The red box are for phrasal verbs. You can see here there's 2 in the first part, but specifically the red box are for phrasal verbs, and the blue underlined are for verb forms and tenses. For example, the past simple, the participle of the perfect, and the past perfect, the present perfect. And I think we have an example of the passive also in the first page. Okay, so also on the bottom here, I'm going to have a screen for the text. So if I have any vocabulary or any extra text that I want to write, I will put here on the bottom. Okay, and on the left also we have word reference for the difficult vocabulary, and the first word, heavy, pesado, is in the text. Okay, so I'm just going to analyze each paragraph, and there's 3 paragraphs on the first page, and it's a bit heavy, but we'll try to speak about as much as possible about each point. Okay, so the green shoot of recovery in February 1918. So in is the preposition. I will read the first paragraph just for pronunciation, and then after I will come back and speak about the points. Adam eBay and his wife Alex took a train into the hills of Gujarat, then trekked 40 kilometers through teak and bamboo jungle to the Church of Brethren mission at Awa, which they were due to take over. The third wave of the pandemic had just erupted. Many of the Bhagats or traditional healers had fled, and the services of the surgeon Sahib, as eBay would become known, were immediately in demand. Once the sickness had passed, however, he sat down to write to the home church in Illinois and recounted the story of Laxman Hapat. Okay, so the context is a bit difficult, but as I said, we'll just focus on the vocabulary and the grammar points first. So the first part is the green juice, the brotes, as I said. The preposition here is for the month. So basically in the month, you say in January, in February, in March, in April. Day, we say on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday. Okay, so just remember for the month, we say in February. Take is the verb, past irregular is took, and it's very typical with transport. Take a train, take a taxi, take a bus, take a plane, and here it's the past took. Took a train into the hills. Okay, so preposition here, it could be possible to the hills, no problem, to the hills. In the hills is possible, but into is just more with movement and probably related to the profundidad, the depth. Okay, so I think depth is the word I wanted to say, and I think into is probably related to that, and in for month. Okay, so just write some notes that you can have, but you can obviously make your own. Then trek. So trekking is the activity. It's like climbing or hiking. So trekking is the sport or the activity, like walking. And here it's the verb. So the verb is to trek, and the past is ed with the extra k. So they trek. That's the verb. 40 kilometers through, a través, through teak. So teak is vocabulary like madera, like wood in English, wood, a type of wood, madera in Espanol, and bamboo jungle too. So the preposition to is connected with trek. So it was a trek to the city center, it was a trek to the mountain, and that's the typical preposition associated with trek. Okay, to the Church of Brethren mission at, the preposition specifically for location, we say at. So I will meet you at O'Connell Street. I will meet you at the cafe. Specific location, we say at. Also in relation to time, we say specific location in time, for example, at 6 o'clock, at 7 o'clock, at 8 o'clock. So at is possible specifically with time and also with a location that you want to meet. Okay, so here's the same. Due to is very, very common, very important, and very advanced and very flexible. So there's two meanings really. The first one is due, the adjective, and it's like expected. So the bus is due in 10 minutes. It's like expected. And then the second example is due to. Okay, so it's like debido a. So there's two significances. And the party is cancelled due to COVID, because of debido a. I'll say, okay, so due to is like because of. Because of, okay, so that's the same here. They is the subject, Adam and Alice, the couple, were due to. So this is the first significance, expected. The couple were expected to take over. So this is a phrasal verb, and take over is related to control or management of a company or anything really, control or management. So in this case, it's a church, and the couple are going to take control or take management, take over the church. It's possible with a company, you can take over a company, you can take over a business. So it's a very good phrasal verb, and it's quite commonly used. Wave, the third wave is onda. Wave obviously is this action, ondar, but in relation to the pandemic, you have the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. Okay. Had erupted. So here we have the past perfect. The verb is to erupt, like the volcano. The volcano can erupt, very dramatic. And here it's related to the pandemic. So it's the participle erupted plus the auxiliary verb have in the past, which is had. So then it's the past perfect. And the past perfect is usually a period in the past before another action in the past. Okay, so that's the past perfect, had just erupted. Okay, and the next one, healer. So the verb is to heal. And I'm going to show you the translation because I think that's the best. Basically, when you are sick or you are unwell, you take medicine to heal yourself. And the translation here, specifically for heal, is curar, curarse. So it's very similar in English. We have two verbs, to heal and to cure. So the person is the healer with the ER. Okay, so you can see ER, that's the person, a healer. Okay, so, and plural. Had fled. So the verb to flee is very, very important. Flee is like escape or run away. Huir in Espanol, I think. H-U-I-R. So to flee is to escape, and the past is fled. And that's a very advanced word, and it's very, very good vocabulary. So here the people, the healers, had escaped or had fled the services of the surgeon. Okay. Demand, again, I'm going to search this word because it is very important. Demand is demandar, exigir. So I'm going to show you if they probably have in demand here. Yes. So just to give you a specific translation, demandando. Okay. So demanded. Very similar. Okay. So in English, basically the preposition that's typical with demand is in. It is in demand. Masks for the coronavirus this year were in demand. A lot of people wanted them. Once is una vez. Had passed is the past perfect. So the verb is pass, and it's in the participle past, plus the auxiliary have in the past had. And again, the past perfect is the period in the past before another action in the past. Probably the past simple is the second action. Sat down is the phrasal verb. So the verb is to sit, and the past is sat. Okay, so he sat down. The preposition down is not really important. It's possible to eliminate down with the same significance. So however, he sat to write to is practically the same as he sat down. So just emphasis, down is just a little more for emphasis. Okay, so he sat down to write, escribir. In my opinion, this is very important because in English, yes, it's probably possible to eliminate to, but for me, it's more common write to. For example, escribir a mi tío, escribir a mi amigo. I write to my friend, I write to my uncle. So in English, in my opinion, to after write is more common. And when people say, I write my friend, I think technically it's possible, but it's just not very comfortable from my experience and in my opinion. So I would always try to include to when it's another person or when it's to some company or organization. And here it's the church, so they're writing to the group. In for the city, so in Dublin, in Barcelona, in Girona, in Alicante, in Illinois, in here in America, okay? And recounted the story, so that's very similar in Spanish, told the story. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. Second paragraph, I'm going to read again, just for pronunciation. So Hapat was a 25-year-old farmer and Christian convert who, having already been widowed once, had married for a second time in January 1919. Not long after the second wedding, he left his village on business. When he returned a few days later, he found it deserted and his new bride lying under a tree in the terminal phase of Spanish flu. He stayed with her until she died, then he dug her a grave. She was a heavy woman, eBay wrote. He could not carry her, so he took a rope and dragged her into the grave. What else was there for him to do? He married his third wife the day after Christmas, 1919. Okay, so very sad, very dark, very depressing. Related to pandemics, of course. Okay, so the first point, 25-year-old, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 words, but also you have 1, 2, 3 hyphens. Okay, so that word in English is a hyphen, hyphen. And when you have the hyphen between the word, these 4 words become, yebar ser, they become one word. So 25-year-old is one adjective. A is the article, indefinite article. 25-year-old is one adjective, and farmer is the substantive. Okay. Having been widowed. So here it's a very complicated tense in grammar. So we need to recognize the verb to be, plus we have the verb to have, plus we have the verb widow. Okay, so I'm going to show you the translation for widow because it is very important in this example. Viuda, okay, surviving wife. And it is possible for male, for the husband as well. And here we have, it's in the passive. Okay, so remember the passive, you need the verb to be, the auxiliary. And this is the verb to be in the auxiliary in the perfect, having been widowed plus the participle. So again, the verb to be, auxiliary, plus the participle of the second verb, widowed. Okay, so he had been widowed once, had married. So the verb to marry, just be careful with the I. So the Y transforms to an I in this case in the past. So the verb is to marry. Okay, so the verb is to marry with the Y, and the past is married. Okay, and here we have the verb have, but it's in the auxiliary. So we need to recognize this form, and it's the past of have. So it's had in the auxiliary plus the participle of married. So it's the past perfect. And again, the past perfect is the period in the past before another action in the past. Usually the second action is the past simple. Okay. So he had married for a second time, in again for the month, in January, in February, in March, no problem. On is typical with business. And when you're relating to traveling, the verb here is dejar, leave. He left, dejar in the past, his village on business, for the purpose of business. So you travel on business, you travel for business is the same. You're traveling on business. Like holiday, you're traveling on holiday. So on business is the typical connection there with the preposition. The next grammar point is it. So he found it. What exactly is it in this case? It is the village. So he found the village, and deserted is the adjective. Okay. So this word is very important because in English, there is a verb to desert, and it's to leave, dejar. Okay, to leave, abandoned, or immediately or dramatically. So for example, the army, the military, the army deserted the city after the war. Okay, but the reason I identify it, because we need to be careful, because there is, okay, so there is the Sahara Desert, but the other word that's very similar, which is different, is a desert. Okay, and a desert in Spanish is postre. And that's the reason you need to be very clear with the difference between a desert, pronunciation, a Sahara Desert, and a dessert, which is the profiteroles or the chocolate. Okay, so he found the city empty, vacío, deserted, nobody in the village. And his new bride, so bride is like the wife, the mujer, but specifically a bride is in Spanish, novia, like the girlfriend. But a bride is more associated with a wedding. So novia is girlfriend just in general, but bride is specific for the wedding. Lying is in tumbarse, in the gerundio. So the verb is to lie under the tree. In tumbarse, bajo el árbol. Okay, so he stayed with her until she died. So this is important because the verb in English is to die, morir. Okay, that's the verb, to die. But you need to be very clear with the substantive is death, the noun or the substantive, and the adjective is dead. Okay, so the adjective is dead, the substantive is the death, and the verb is to die. And here, okay, it's just the past simple. So no problem. The point, as I said, is the difference between the substantive and the adjective. Doug is very important. If you recognize it, very good, but the subject is he. Doug is the past irregular of the verb, and the verb is to dig, excavar. Okay, so the verb is to dig, excavar, and Doug is the past. There is an expression to dig a hole. is in conversation, if you are making a mess in the conversation and the next you continue to make a bad situation in the conversation, bad, you dig a hole, excavar un hueco. So to dig a hole is a famous expression in English. But here's the past, he dug her grave. And grave is the place where the body goes in the ground. That's the grave. The coffin is the box, but the grave is the place in the ground. Okay. But the reason I identify it, because in Spanish you say grave, the situation is muy grave. In English you can say the same. It's very grave, just the pronunciation. The situation is very, very grave, very serious. She was a heavy woman, pesado, as we said. And then could is the modal. And after the modal, we have the infinitive. So in the negative, obviously not, but he is the subject. Could is the modal. And the next verb after the modal is the infinitive. So he could not carry llevar. He could not carry her. Okay. Drag is very, very advanced and very colorful and very good vocabulary. So I recommend you try to analyze and study this verb. So the verb is to drag. Arrastrar, I think is the translation. So the verb to drag. Yes, okay, arrastrar. But we have many uses of the verb to drag. So in this example is the past simple with the extra G, past simple. But I'll give you a few examples. The day is dragging, and that means going very slow. Okay, that's one possibility. To have a drag of a cigarette is like a small inhalation, to inhale. You can have a drag queen, which is, I think, drag queen is the person who dresses in female, very colorful. I'm going to get you the translation specifically just to be clear. Drag queen, there we go. Okay, so the drag queen is the same. Transformista, okay. And yeah, so, and then the final example is with the child in the bed, for example, in the morning, if they're very sleepy and the mother has to drag the child from bed for school. That's just an informal possibility, to drag somebody from bed if they're very sleepy and very tired. Okay, so he dragged her into, again, that's more specific and more emphasis of the movement of the preposition. Dragged her into the grave. What else? Like what more? You can say anything else, like anything more. Somebody else, like another person. And here it's also possible nothing else. And here's what. What else was there for him to do? Okay, so then the final paragraph I will read again. So before the pandemic, mortality rates had been in decline the world over, partly due to advances driven by germ theory. The pandemic reversed that trend for 3 years. India paid a particularly high price, so high, in fact, that in 1964, the Nobel Prize-winning economist Theodore Schultz used what happened in that country to test the theory that there is a surplus labor in traditional farming systems. He concluded that there isn't, since India's post-flu agricultural output shrunk by 3% compared to pre-1918. Okay, so the first one is had been. It's in the past perfect, and again, the past perfect is the period in the past before another action, which is usually the past simple. Okay, in decline is the typical preposition associated with decline. So something is in decline. The city centre is in decline. It's deteriorating. So just remember the association with decline. The typical preposition is in. The world over means everywhere, every part of the world. Normally we say all over the world. And here it's exactly the same. The world over is another way to say it. Okay, so the world over is another way. Partly is like a little bit, so not completely, not totally. Partly is only just. And due to, remember the explanation, due to, the first one is expected. The bus is due in 10 minutes. But if you have due to, it's debido a, because of, or in Espanol, debido a. So a little because of advances, driven by, so the verb is drive, and driven is the participle. Reverse the trend is a very good expression. On Twitter, you have trending topics, so something that's very popular or very trendy is the adjective very popular, trendy clothes. Okay, so the trend is the substantive, and here it's reverse the trend, so it's to change or reverse that trend. Pay is associated with price, so pay is pagar in the past, paid is irregular, pagar in the past, and then here it's associated with price, so you pay the price. Okay, that's the famous expression. So if you make your decision, you pay the price, not in the shop, no, but it's more metaphorical. Okay, and here India paid a particularly high price. The next structure is very important, and I like it because it's a good complicated structure. So is really connected with that. And then you have the adjective. So happy that, so hungry that. In fact, is just separate like the hecho. And here, again, so the next verb is important, also used. So hungry that I could eat 3 dinners, for example. So here it's different. It's so high. The price was so high. In fact, it's just extra, so it's not really important. It's just extra. So the price was so high that in 1964, Theodore Schultz used. So the next verb is important, also used. And use is utilizar. So be careful with the difference between utilizar, to use, and the past is, sorry, there is another structure, I used to go, which is different. That's habit in the past that's finished. Okay, so there's 2 completely different meanings really. The verb to use, utilizar, and used to go, used to eat, used to drink is a habit in the past that is finished, but here it's utilizar. In is associated with country, so the preposition in is associated with country. Test the theory is the expression. You have a theory and you need to test the theory. That's the combination. In is associated with systems. So labor in a system is the typical preposition. And then since, the difference between since and from. Since is one moment in the past, since 8 o'clock this morning, since last year. But from is usually 2 points. From 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So from is usually 2 points, from to, and since is just one moment in the past. Okay, here we have the possession, India's post-flu agricultural output. So the S here is for the possession of India. Output is a very good word, and I'm going to specifically get the translation for you here. So the output is economics, really, production. Okay, there's a few examples. And it's more economic. So the output of a country or the output of the business. Here we have the participle, and it's a very good vocabulary to identify and to learn. So the verb in English is to shrink, and basically it means to make smaller. And then the past is shrank. Okay, that's the past, and then shrunk is the participle. So shrink, shrank, shrunk, and here is the participle. By 3%. Compared to, again with compare, we always have the preposition to. Compare Italy to Spain, compare Ireland to Brazil, so compare to. Okay, so that's the first page, excuse me, and we're going to go to the second page, and it's quite interesting. So again, I hope that you're finding it all right. So the same rule apply with the colors. You can see the orange is for vocabulary, the green is for prepositions, the blue is for grammar forms or verb forms and grammar points, and the red are for phrasal verbs. Okay, so I'm going to read the first paragraph. Pre-agricultural levels, but humans are supremely resilient, and the recovery seems to have begun almost immediately the shock had passed. Though India saw a 30% reduction in births in 1919, starting in 1920, fertility not only returned to pre-flu levels, it exceeded them, triggering what has been described as the beginning of a democratic revolution. So supremely, that's the adverb, like mente in Espanol, lentamente, suavemente. Here it's supremely. So ly is the mente. To have begun, so the verb is begin, began, begun. And that's the perfect in the auxiliary verb to have. But the key here is the verb begin, began, begun. So it's the participle. Shock is asustar. You have a shock, a surprise, a fright. I'm going to write that word as well. Fright is a shock. And like asustar in Espanol. And then had passed is the past perfect. So the verb is pass in the participle. And the auxiliary have in the past, had passed. So another example of the past perfect. In this text, we have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 until now. Saw, so the verb is see, and the past is irregular. Saw, a 30% reduction in births. So in is associated with reduction, a reduction in price, a reduction in temperature, a reduction in deaths, a reduction in births. Not only is a very good grammar structure for your writing, for your speaking, and also to analyze in a text. So when you have 2 things or more, for example, I am not only tired, I am also hungry, okay? So it's a good structure when you have 2 points to make or 2 things to say. And here, not only returned to flu levels, but it exceeded them. So but is an option, it's not necessary, but frequently it's also with but, not only but. It exceeded them. Triggering is very good. So if you have the pistol, the trigger, the substantive, is the part of the pistol. I'm going to get the translation here, but it's very good vocabulary. And a trigger is gatillo. Okay, so the substantive is gatillo, in English a trigger, but the verb is very creative in English, to trigger. It's like iniciar, to start. Okay, so here it's triggering in the gerundio. Has been, that's the present perfect, has been described as, and again the association with described is very typical as, describe yourself as, describe the city as big. So just be conscious of the association. Okay. So the next paragraph, I will read it as well just for pronunciation. So it wasn't only India that saw a rebound. Fertility rates collapsed in Europe around 1918, only to recover spectacularly 2 years later, briefly attaining levels higher than those seen prior to 1914. Most observers put this down to the war and to a wave of conception that followed the men's return. But that doesn't explain why neutral Norway also saw a baby boom in 1920. Norwegian men did not go away to fight, but like the rest of Norwegian population, they did suffer from flu. 15,000 Norwegians died in the pandemic, and there were 4,000 fewer conceptions in 1918 than would have been expected. But the following year saw conceptions surpass what was needed to make up for it. That shortfall by 50%, in other words, 3 babies were conceived in 1919 for every 2 that had not been born in 1918. Could the flu have contributed to a global baby boom? Indeed, it could. And the explanation lies in the way it chose its victims. Okay, so it's quite a long paragraph, and I will just try to identify the most important things in my opinion. Rebound is good vocabulary, and rebound here is, in Spanish, recuperación, recuperate, reestablish, rebotar. Really, it's rebotar, but I think the context is recuperation or reestablish. In for the continent, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe. Around is approximately. Collapse is just vocabulary. Collapse the city, collapse the mountain, collapsed, and it's the past ed, regular. Briefly is like a short period of time. So brief, breve in Espanol, is the adjective, and then brevemente is the substantive, okay? But there is a possibility, the verb to brief the president. I'm going to change that spelling. Okay, so there is a possibility to brief. That means to give the most important information to the president in a short way. So you tell him the details, or you tell the boss or the manager. To brief them is to give them the most important information in a short space or a short sentence. Okay. We also have a briefcase, and a briefcase is the bag, or like a suitcase. A briefcase is for business, where the place where you put all the papers. And specifically, I'll get the translation here just so you're totally sure. A briefcase in Spanish is maletín. Okay. Portafolio, cartera. Yeah, a case. It's a carrying case for documents. And that is exactly the same here. Sorry, related to briefly, brevemente. Higher than, that's the comparative. Slower than, faster than. When you have, yeah, higher than. Those, remember the difference. This, that, these, and those. Singular, this. That is away. These is close to you, plural. And those is plural, away from you. Okay, so those. Prior to is related to priority, but prior to 1914 has the significance of before. Prior to is before. Prior to the cinema, I went to the restaurant. Before, very important. Put this down to is a very good phrasal verb. And yesterday, I think in the exercises, we saw this also. And it's explaining the responsibility or the explanation. So most observers put this, like the level or the number, down to like the reason. So most observers explain the reason for this. It's very, very good. And to a wave of conception that follow the men's, that's the possession, the return of the men. Baby boom is good vocabulary. So a boom is like an increase. A boom in price. A property boom, it's a big increase. Okay. So here a baby boom is the increase of babies, the number of births. Okay. The rest are the others. So you have maybe two people, and then the rest are the other people. Okay. So they're very simple, but very adaptable words that we use. Did here is related obviously to the verb. So the verb is to suffer, and the preposition suffer from is very typical. Suffer from flu, suffer from the illness. But did here is just more emphasis. So it's the past, and really it just emphasizes the suffering. Okay, so it's not necessary in this sentence, but it just makes more emphasis on the verb. Norwegians died. So there, again, remember the verb is to die, substantive is death, and the adjective is dead. So you need to be clear with the three difference, the verb, the adjective, and the substantive. And there were, so there, in Espanol, hay mucha gente en el centro. There are a lot of people in the center, but in the past, there were. Okay. Would have been expected, a very, very good structure. And this is an example of a good level that you could include for your writing and for your speaking if you're taking a test. So that impresses a lot. To make up for is a phrasal verb, to compensate. Okay, and surpass, I think, is very similar to go top, to over the top, exceed. And to make up for is compensate. Shortfall is very good vocabulary. It's like so fall is caer and short is corto. But a shortfall is the number that you get lower than the expectation. So you expect maybe 200, but you receive 100. So the shortfall is the difference. Okay, and it's really good vocabulary. In other words, that's a good linker, that's a good cohesive device. And again, for your writing, for speaking, if you're doing a test, it's very good. War conceived, that's the passive. So the verb is to conceive, but here we have the D, so it's the participle, and we have the auxiliary, the verb to be in the past. So it's the passive. 3 babies were conceived in 1918. Contribute is typical with to, contribute to. Indeed, again, it's very good linker, a good cohesive device, and it's very similar to in fact, like the hecho. It. So again, in English, we need to be conscious all the time of the subject, it. It is related to the contribution in the previous sentence. The contribution could, and the explanation lies. Lies is in Tumbarse. So for example, in Dublin, on Grafton Street, at the end of Grafton Street lies Stephen's Green. It's the position in Toombar, it's the location. So here the explanation lies, it's the location of the explanation. In is associated with way. It is the pandemic or the virus. chose, and then it is possession. So my victims, your victims, his victims, her victims, but it's because it's associated with the virus. Okay. So the final paragraph, the pandemic took time to recede. The middle peak of the W-shaped mortality curve shrank until between 1922 and 1928, depending on where you are in the world. The W bottomed out in a U. The Spanish flu had been tamed, but it had left behind a very changed humanity. By purging the less than fit, those who were already sick with malaria, TB, and other diseases, it had created a smaller, healthier population that was now able to reproduce at higher rates. This is one theory for what fertility rebounded so dramatically. Why fertility rebounded so dramatically. Survivors like Laxman Hapid now married other survivors who were, by definition, healthier and more robust than those who had perished. Okay, so a lot of good vocabulary. Again, to recede is to come back. So the water in the ocean is receding, it's coming back. The peak is el pico in Espanol, the middle peak of the mountain, it's the peak. You can have the peak of your career, it's the top of your career. Shrank we saw already, so the verb shrink, make smaller. Shrank is the past simple. Depending on, this is very important because in Espanol it's depende de, but in English it's always depending on. Depending on, that's very, very crucial. And then in for world, the location in the world. Bottom out is a phrasal verb, very advanced, very good vocabulary, and it means in a graph, if the graph goes up and then comes down and then it hits the bottom and out. So it hits the bottom and stays at that level. So the finish, the crisis goes up, the peak, the pico, and then it comes down, bottom, and it bottoms out. So it finishes. Okay. Had been tame. Okay, so the verb is to tame and it's related to an animal. To tame an animal. And here the translation in Spanish is the verb to tame. It's also an adjective, but here the verb specifically for tame, okay, it just takes 1 second, I think. It's like calm, okay? So tame is domesticado, domesticated, very similar in English. Domesticated, amansado. And then the verb is, well, here's the adjective, so let's find the verb just to be sure. Amansar, domesticar, okay, the same. And then here it's the participle tamed, and it's the auxiliary verb to be in the past purpose, so it is the passive, had been tamed. But so it is the virus or the pandemic. Again, we need to be very conscious it is in English. Had left, so it's the past perfect. Dejar is left, behind is the preposition. So it had left, a very changing, no real problem with the phrasal verb, it's the same, just dejar atrás. Purging, okay, so purging, the verb to purge, it's very advanced. And okay, so no problem, it's the same in Spanish, which is a good help. Less than fit, again, we have the hyphen, 1, 2, 3 words, 2 hyphens. So really it's one word. Fit is en forma, so menos que en forma. Those, again, it's plural, the people, these and those. Who is the relative pronoun, who were already sick, verb to be, okay. This point is very important. Other, in English, always has the next word, the next substantive in the plural. Other weeks, other days, other years. So with other, we have plural. Other weeks, other years, other days. So always, the majority of the time, it's other plus plural, and the singular would be another. So you need to be very clear with all those differences, and it's quite common and important. Okay, so here it's the same, other diseases in the plural. Smaller, healthier, so they're comparatives. Small, smaller, healthy, healthier. So just the spelling with the I, the Y changes to I. Was able, the able is always with the verb to be. I am able, you are able. At is related to rates, at a high rate, at a low rate. And so, again, it's emphasis, so dramatically. It's more than dramatic. Here we have the verb to survive, but the person is a survive or with the O. So you need to be careful with the O. Sometimes we have the E, for example, painter, but here it's the O. And just in the detail, it's very important for exams and just in general. Again, other with the plural, survivors, and then healthier, comparative, and then more is associated with than, more than. And then had, perished is the past participle, and the verb is to perish, and it's a synonym of to die, morir, when the people die. It's more advanced vocabulary, I think. Okay, and then the final part, can we really say that humans were healthier in the wake of the Spanish flu? It seems extraordinary, but in one very crude way, we can. Their biological capacity to reproduce increased. Okay, so the first expression here is very advanced again. So in English, the wake is usually the period after. It's related to a funeral. When a person dies, you have the wake. So the wake is the time after. And here it's a very famous expression. You can use it in every situation. In the wake of the accident, in the wake of the pandemic, it means the period after the accident or the period after the pandemic. In is associated with way, and crude is crudo in Espanol. Okay, so that's the second page. And here we have the third page. I'll do the same structure again. So the same vocabulary in orange, vocabulary in orange, prepositions in green, exactly the same. Okay. It's crude, it had more children. It's crude because other factors besides biology shape the number of children people have, religious and economic considerations, for example. But there are other indications that men in particular were healthier, namely that their life expectancy increased. Before 1918, women had lived on average close to 6 years longer than men. The flu killed roughly 170 more men than women per 100,000 people. And by the time the pandemic was over, the gap in life expectancy had closed to 1 year. Women wouldn't regain their previous advantage until the 1930s, mainly because by then heart disease had become both much more prevalent and more male. Okay, I will just identify the key for me. Besides is a very, very good word, and it's like apart from. So you need to be careful between two words. We have beside with no S. Beside is al lado, but with the S, it's apart from. Okay, so I'm just going to write this because it is so important. Beside is al lado, and then besides with the S is apart from in English. Okay. Other with the plural, in is with particular. Let me show you. Roughly is a key word, like approximately. Roughly is approximately. And I think everything else is quite good. We've spoken about already. Past perfect, past perfect. By then is also a key. So by then is like until that moment. By then is like at that time. It is a key structure, and it causes confusion in exams. And I recommend to focus on that structure by then. Okay, so let's look at this. I'm going to just identify the key vocabulary in the last page. So overall, it's like in total. Argue, so that's no problem. It's in the past simple. But here you have the verb, the modal can, plus the infinitive of the verb be, can be argued. So that's the passive, because we have the verb to be, plus the participle. Worse off. Okay, so this red phrasal verb is a very good phrasal verb, and it means in a condition, a worse condition. So if I go to the city centre and I'm dry, my clothes are very dry, but it starts to rain and my clothes are destroyed, I come home worse off. Basically, I come home in a worse condition and a worse position than I started. Okay, so it means that you're in a worse condition than before. It's a very, very creative, very advanced, very good, solid phrasal verb. And vulnerable to, preposition. Latter half is very good English also. So the half is the mitad. And basically we say the former and the latter. There is a structure, the former and the latter. So, for example, I'm going to show you the sentence. I like Italy and Brazil. Okay. Then the former is in Europe. So the first, basically the former is in Europe and the latter is in America, South America. Okay, so very good example, the former and the latter. So the latter is like the second, segundo. Likely is another key word. So here you can see likely, and it really means probable in Espanol, or English probably. So more probable, more más probable is very important. Here you have likely and also likely. 50% were more likely than women who weren't pregnant to develop is the key. Desarrollar. So más probable. According to is very important. Según in Espanol. According to estimate, según in Espanol. Did here is related to the verb. The verb I think is to die. So you can also use do for emphasis, as we saw before for emphasis, but here it refers to the previous verb to die, if they died or did. So the verb is to do, hacer, but really it's substitution for the previous verb to die. Culprit, I think it's the same in Spanish, just let me double check. Culprit is culpable, I think very similar to culpable. I think it's going to take 1 second with the connection, but we'll return. And the orange, as you can see, is the vocabulary, culpable. Okay, so the culprit is the person. And divert, here we have divert, and the key here is the preposition to. Divert traffic to. So really the key, you can see the small line I have drawn. So that's the key, divert to. Might have is a modal, and we have the present perfect. Succumbed, I'm going to translate that for you as well, sorry, because it is quite advanced. The verb is to succumb. Okay, so it's very, very similar in Spanish, so that's no problem. And so yeah, so with the verb divert, you can say divert to the lungs, but also you can say divert away in the second example. So you need a preposition with divert very often. Okay. To work out is a phrasal verb, and it's to find a solution. So if you have a problem, you need to work out the problem. You need to find the solution of the problem. In is related to population, and might is the modal. And after the modal, we have the infinitive. It might explain. Okay, so it's the modal and the infinitive. The difficult vocabulary here is a miscarriage. It's related to pregnancy. When the woman is pregnant and unfortunately she loses the baby or the baby dies before birth, it's a miscarriage. It's related to the verb to carry. Okay, and it's that context, it's related to pregnancy. So a miscarriage is when the baby dies before being born. Okay, and as I said, working out is finding the solution, and I think everything is quite clear. Orange is vocabulary, the lifespan, a dent. Okay, so the dent in the population, I'm going to show you specifically dent. It's related to a car. If you have the car and you have a little problem, a little impact on the car, you have a dent. Maybe in Spanish it's similar. No, it's abolladura, meadura. Okay. Merma, impacto. Okay. So that's it. The dent in the population, the impact in the population. Left, dejar, the loss. Okay, so this is important. The loss, the verb. The verb is to lose. The substantive is the loss. And the adjective is lost. So just be very careful with the three different meanings. Okay, so the verb is to lose, the pronunciation. The loss is the substantive and lost is the adjective. There is another word that's completely different, loose. It's called suelto, I think. When something is very aprieto, tight, the opposite is loose, very open. So they're very, very different. So you need to be clear of the difference. To lose and loose. Okay. The very good expression here is to weather. Normally we say to weather the storm. I'm going to write it here. To weather the storm is metaphorical, to survive the storm. And in this example, they say the slings and arrows. So basically the arrow is when in the war or the old war, they have the arrow. It's like a pistol and a gun. So it's ammunition. It's a weapon. And the sling is very similar as well. So it's like ammunition. And it's an interesting creative. It's the most creative sentence in that paragraph. Okay. Turn up is a phrasal verb. It's like to appear. If you turn up at the party, turn up at the meeting, it's to appear or arrive or go, attend, assister. I think assister is the best translation. You turned up. At is the preposition for location, and here it's associated with a depot. Just be careful with the pronunciation of the T. It's silent, so we say the depot. Okay, so there's a few words in English that are silent T. Depot, buffet, debut. They're the three that are in my mind that are very important. Silent T. Okay, so the pronunciation. And here it's the depot. On is typically associated with average, on average, and the other orange words are just vocabulary. Lifespan. Arise is related to the verb to arise, but it's very typical with a problem arises, like appear, or the question appears. So it's a synonym for appear. And we'll just look quickly at the final page. Anything that's of note. Expose is associated with the preposition to. May is the modal. And again, after the modal, you have the infinitive. Again, there's 3 examples in the text so far. May go, may like. Seem is parathere. Like is como. Suffer, again, the typical preposition from. So you can see some repetition. Suffer from, suffer from. Earn is ganar. Earn a salary, and salary is a synonym for a wage. There's a small difference, but basically it's the same. But the key is ganar. Ganar, a salary. Earn a wage, earn a salary. Likely is probably, again. So this is the 3rd example. Likely, the same, 4th example. Claim is acclamar or reclamar. So here is reclamar. It's associated with benefit. You claim a benefit. Stress is no problem, but just be clear with the plural es. Stresses. And then unfurled is related to a flag. So the bandera. If you have the bandera and you fold doblar, and the opposite for doblar is unfurl. And here it's related to life, la vida. So you just need to be careful with la vida. The verb is to live, pronunciation to live, and the substantive is a life. And here it's the substantive, a life, unfurled. Okay, so that's a good example of the analysis. I hope you enjoyed the grammar. The story's a little sad, but the book is interesting. As I said, that's the book, Pale Rider. Pale is the color, like very white. If the person is sick, they are pale, okay? And the lady is Laura in Espanol, Spinney. Okay, or Spiny, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting read, but the grammar is more important for me in this video. And I hope you enjoyed, as I said, the video. I'm happy to do this for free. I hope you get the benefit. I hope you get the benefit. I hope you enjoy it. And if you want to share the video, great. The more people that see, the better. It's very long, but I hope you are still active and awake. If you want to give a tip or to make a donation, I will leave the PayPal email address at the end. And that would be great if you want, but don't worry. It's not necessary, but thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day and the celebrations tonight. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.